I added team-up abilities into Overwatch. Team-ups are a mechanic in Marvel Rivals where heroes get new powers by playing with specific heroes. Like, if you play Jetpack Cat with a Brigitte, what if instead of meleeing, you get to use Brigitte's flail or even better, her whip shot? So using Workshop, I added team-ups into Overwatch, which you'll be able to play using a code I'll reveal at the end of the video. Anyways, I'm Blueberry, and let's see those team-ups. Let's start with the newest hero, Shion, and her son, kind of, Mizuki. Now, Shion and Mizuki actually already have an ability that's extremely similar to one another. So I could either have Mizuki gain overhealth when using Katashiro Return, like Shion's Evade, or I could let Shion recall back to her position when using Evade. And I think we know the obvious winner here. So when using Evade, Shion can use her abilities and deal damage and then recall back if needed, which matches with Mizuki's Katashiro Return. Anchors actually get a passive bonus for activating a team-up. Since Shion is an accurate marksman, I decided Mizuki's passive bonus would be 25% more critical damage. And I'll call this team-up Hashimoto Bonds. Speaking of Hashimoto, let's do a team-up with the available yokai heroes being Kiriko, Mizuki, Hanzo, and Genji. Now since Kanazaka is Kiriko's town, I decided to make her the anchor for this team-up. Only issues are Swift Step and Protection Zuzu can be really remade into any of their abilities, and plus Genji and Hanzo already have wall climbs. I had an idea of making her Swift Step explode and knock away enemies and teleporting to one of the 3 heroes, but since I already did that in my reworked perks video, which you should totally check out, I wanted to go a different route. And one thing I can actually remake is her Kitsune Rush effects. I can't increase attack speed through Workshop, but I can increase cooldown speed and move speed, which gave me an idea. What if a certain ability would trigger Kitsune Rush effect for just that hero? So now when Hanzo uses Storm Arrows, he gets 30% move speed and 100% cooldown acceleration. And same with Genji's Deflect and Mizuki's Katashiro Return. Though not as flashy as the Hashimoto Bonds team up, I think it'd be extremely helpful during the match. But let me know if you have any more ideas in the comments below. And lastly, I gave Kiriko 5% increased move speed for her anchor passive since the team up is made up entirely of ninjas. And I'm calling the team up the Kanazaka Guardians. Hopefully that's not too corny. Now another obvious team up would be Overwatch, but considering there's so many heroes in Overwatch now, how could I decide which group of people to pick? I decided to stick with the 3 heroes present in the start of the 0-hour cinematic, mainly because I had a crazy idea with Tracer. Her recall is the most well-known ability by far, but imagine if you could stick it onto Winston and Mei. Now, I can't just add new abilities to a hero's kit, but I can turn them into passives. So now when Mei or Winston reach critical health, they'll automatically recall just like Tracer. However, this is obviously once per life, and can only be activated again after death. Since both Winston and Mei are pretty tanky, I had Tracer's anchor passive be 5% less damage received, and I'm calling this team up 0-hour. Now going to the other side, Talon definitely deserves a team up as well, but I ran into the same problem of who to give it to. I decided to give it to the new Empire. Since Vendetta, Mauga, and Moira got new Empire skins, they would be the team up chosen for Talon. Vendetta was obviously going to be the anchor since she's the leader, but none of her abilities can be really implemented into other heroes. But I remembered she used to have an old perk called Swift Vengeance, where killing the last enemy that eliminated her would grant overhealth and reset her cooldowns, which gave me an idea. So now if Vendetta gets eliminated, that attacker gets marked. Once the marked enemy gets eliminated, Vendetta, Mauga, and Moira will all get overhealth and their cooldowns reset, which is a really neat callback to Vendetta avenging her father in the lore. I just personally really like the idea of your team working together to kill a certain hero and using the buffs to snowball for more eliminations. Since both Mauga and Moira have lifesteal, I decided to make Vendetta's anchor passive 50% lifesteal, and I'm calling this team up New Empire. Now some people may be wondering where Emre is considering he also got a new Empire skin, but that's because I wanted him in a team up with Freja. Since she's taking care of him, she'll be the anchor. And my first idea was giving Emre slow fall when scoping in, just like Freya's take aim, but this proved to be underwhelming, especially since he can't really get high in the air. So I decided to increase the self knockback of his cyber frag, and that's when it hit me. What if Emre could also dash after launching from his cyber frag, just like Freya's quick dash? This definitely gets him a more mobile playstyle that matches up with Freya, while also forcing him to pick between movement and damage. Since Emre has a passive that gives him instant healing when reaching passive regeneration, I decided Freya's anchor passive would also have her get 30 healing instant when starting passive regeneration, and I'll call this team up Old Friends, or maybe Reconnection. I don't know, if you guys have any good name ideas for some of these team ups, feel free to let me know. Now let's switch to another evil faction, being the Null Sector. Zenyatta and Ramattra would be the perfect team up for this, with Zenyatta as the anchor. Now an obvious idea would to have Ramattra make himself a Harmony Orb when entering Nemesis form, but that's not too interesting, and Ramatra's all about annihilation. So what if instead Ramatra's Ravenous Vortex applies Discord Orb to enemies? Don't worry, this will grant a smaller effect of only 10% increased damage received, but yes, it does stack. I am so sorry, tank mains. This does create a lot more cooperation with your team, as your allies can take advantage of all the increased damage. And since Ramattra is all about punching, I decided Zenyatta's anchor passive would be a 25% increased melee damage, and I decided to call this team up Harmonic Dissonance. Now if you guys didn't know, I'm actually a huge Wuyang main. I reached top 500 challenger one-tricking him, and I even stream him on Twitch. So he's obviously necessary in the video, and who better to team him up with than his older sister? I actually really wanted Wuyang's water to be able to distinguish burning enemies for bonus damage, but unfortunately it wasn't possible in the workshop. However, they actually do have matching abilities, the main difference being that Anran's Inferno Rush damages enemies it goes through. So I made Wuyang's Rushing Torrent also damage enemies it passes through and knocks him away, which gives him a more damage dive playstyle that allows him to rush in with Anran. And since he's a support, I made Anran's anchor passive a 10% increased healing received and called the team up Familial Bonds. And speaking of new Overwatch heroes, I want to do a team up for Brigitte and Jetpack Cat. Now I did mention the example at the start of the video, but I didn't actually go through with that because let's be real here, this looks pretty dumb. My original idea was to have Brigitte's rally also activate where Jetpack Cat was, but unfortunately I can't put a flag on Jetpack Cat's model. A very similar idea though would be with Inspire. So when Brigitte triggers Inspire, it'll activate on Jetpack Cat as well for 50% healing, which also does stack with Brigitte's regular Inspire, allowing for intense team coordination and support. Since Brigitte and Jetpack Cat were both supports, I had Brigitte's anchor passive be a simple 10% increase healing and called it Feline Functions. But obviously Brigitte's own father's in the game and Godfather as well, so a team up with them was definitely in store. Since Torbjorn would be the anchor here, I added in Bastion as well since they support each other in the lore. My original idea was to have every attack be explosive, but this wouldn't really bode well with Bastion and also would be a lot of visual clutter. But I got another idea with Torbjorn's Overload. Theoretically, I could remake Overload and apply it to Brigitte, Bastion, and Reinhardt, but as I mentioned, I can't just add abilities to heroes' kits. So instead, when Torbjorn uses Overload, it'll also apply towards Brigitte, Reinhardt, and Bastion. It'll give them overhealth and move speed, but unfortunately not increase attack or reload speed as that is not yet available in Workshop. But this still allows for a lot of cooperation and timing as you're able to get heavy engages or even save an ally's life. Since every hero in this team up has armor, I gave Torbjorn 25 more armored health for his anchor passive, and I'm calling it Swedish engineering. That's enough with Overwatch. Let's go back to some bad guys, and who not better than Moira. Since she was the science behind Reaper's Wraith form as well as Widowmaker's apathy, they'd be perfect for a team up. Now the obvious choice was her Fade, especially because it would be really easy to apply it to Reaper and have him go invisible during Wraith form. This actually works really well and forces the enemy to guess where he might end up as well as pull off some really sneaky engagements. However, the main issue would be Widowmaker as she didn't have a similar movement ability, and I couldn't really apply Fade to her grappling hook in a non-clunky way. Now it would be really easy to just make Venomine have lifesteal since that would connect with Moira, but since this is one team up, I wanted to make sure Reaper and Widowmaker's buff would be similar at least in aesthetics. So what if instead we flip Fade on its head? I actually made Venomine Fade enemies instead. Faded enemies can't shoot, move, or use abilities but are also invulnerable, which gives time for Widowmaker to run away or line up a headshot. Now a 5-second stun might seem like a lot, but since you're invulnerable, it's honestly not too bad, and I think it works well for the team up. Of course, since both Widowmaker and Reaper are damage heroes, I had Moira's anchor passive be a 5% increase in damage dealt, and I'm calling this team up Biotic Nourishment. Aside from Moira, another evil enemy is Domina, who's the leader of Vishkar, and considering we have 2 other Vishkar employees in Overwatch, they would all make a perfect team up. Now the big issue is that these heroes already have very similar abilities, having to do with shield and reconstruction, so I had to get creative. So instead of giving Lifeweaver or Symettra a buff on their own, I decided to have Domina buff them herself. So now Domina's Sonic Repulsions now actually grant 75 overhealth when using Symettra and Lifeweaver, and unlike most other overhealth, it actually doesn't decay over time. However, it does max out, meaning you can't stack multiple Sonic Repulsors. This forms a much closer bond between these heroes, forcing them to stick nearby and making Domina pick between an offensive stun or a defensive shield. And since everyone in the team up had shields, I decided to make Domina's anchor passive 75 bonus max shield HP, and I'm calling this team up Vishkar's Finest. Now if that looked like fun, you can try out the game on yourself using the code GEGFZ. Well, what are your thoughts on the Overwatch team ups? Do you think they'd be fun additions to the game, or do you think their balancing would throw off the meta? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Anyways, if you didn't know, this is actually my 3rd ever video, my first ever being reworked perks, and my 2nd one adding Marvel Rival heroes into Overwatch. So if you could please subscribe and help out the channel, that would be super amazing. Anyways, feel free to also check out my Twitch, my TikTok, or my Instagram, because that would be helpful as well. Anyways, till next time. Bye-bye, berries!